Overcoming abuse doesn't just happen. It takes positive steps every day. Let today be the day you start to move forward. Speak out. Break the silence. Get help. Stop the violence.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new edition of our talk show, Speak Out, Break the Silence, Get Help, Stop the Violence. Today is the third part about child abuse, and I would like to introduce my honorable guest, Daniela Valdevia and Liliana Tinoco Beccart, here with me. Daniela is lawyer and Liliana is integration expert. Today it's a very sensitive subject. It's about the kids and how vulnerable. Today it's a very sensitive subject about the kids and how vulnerable they are. Do you think that kids and young people are more affected by psychological trauma in a relationship where exists domestic violence between the parents?
Definitely. Regardless whether they are being victims themselves, that they are not being beaten up or scream or anything, but if they are being witnesses, if they are witnessing any sort of violence, this is gonna change the way they're gonna behave at school or with other children, with siblings. There are two ways. They could become perpetrators, abusers themselves, or they can end up being victims as well.
Because they think that is the normality, because children, they just repeat or they show their behavior towards others, copying the behavior of parents. Liliana, what do you think about the subject?
Well, I think it's a very sad example that how can you raise violent people, right? The children are just copying this toxic masculinity and think that it's normal to act violently. So it's really, as Daniela said, definitely a very bad example for the small ones.
Do you think exists a profile or some signs which will tell to teachers, to psychologists, to social workers from school that something happened in that family?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I would say, like, school is a microcosmos of society, and it's very important to have a look at children. And one of the symptoms of domestic violence will, of course, be represented in children's behavior. For instance, abandonment, when you see children are not dressed up correctly, or they are dirty, they're wearing like dirty or broken clothes. When they are not interacting with other children, for instance, they are staying, they're not going, they're not going for break, they are eating too much because they have anxiety, or they are the other way around, like they are not eating at all, they are not socializing. Another thing could be that they develop different behavior, like more aggressive towards their peers, that they start to yell, or maybe to behave aggressively. So I think it's something
they have signs of trauma.
Well, trauma is something that should be assessed by a psychologist, definitely. Mm-hmm. But these signs can tell you that something is wrong at home, that something is going on. And maybe they are not going to talk about these with their parents, so it's really important that teachers make a safe space that they can speak out.
Okay, thank you very much. So what happened when children or children are abused by parents? You have experience from your interviews. Did you find out how kids behave in this case?
I had some ladies that reported the children were not well at school, as Daniela was mentioning, but not because of physical violence. It was because of this man was using the culture of the wife, saying horrible things about the country where the mother comes from, using this cultural difference to humiliate the mother. And then this child was totally confused because, of course, the child is half Brazilian and half something else. And of course, this child will have lots of problems, even of identity. Imagine how bad it is for the psychological health of this child.
So, Daniela, how we know, beside of all these signs, that the kid is abused, and if the kid is abused, how the kid can say it, or what the kid can do?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the personality of the child and on the age. Like, you cannot expect from a child in early childhood saying, I was being victim of abuse, or going to the teacher and telling the story. But we might pay attention, because sometimes when it's the case of children being only from mothers and having a stepfather as a Swiss person or a person from Europe, that they maybe would not say directly to the mom that they are suffering any sort of violence, but maybe they would say something like, you know, my friend at school is having issues with his stepfather, you know, and then you have to pay attention. Maybe he's talking about himself. And it depends. If we have raised children that are strong and they can speak up and they can stand for themselves and maybe recognize their emotions, then it's easier. It's more likely that they are going to talk about this with a teacher or with another student or with a social worker from school. But in the other way around, if you have not talk with your children about emotions, and your children have seen how you're being beaten up or how you yell at each other with your husband, it's very likely that they are going to fear saying anything and they are not going to talk about anything. So it's really hard to put this responsibility on children, saying, okay, you're being victim of abuse, so speak out. It's really hard. They are not they don't have to play these roles. So I think we have to be very responsible as adults and parents and try to detect these signals of violence they are going through, trying to talk about emotions, being very informed on who our child is more connected to, what's his or her hobbies, best friends, best subject in school, because that's the only way we can build some trust, and the child will open up if there is any sort of violence either in school or at home.
And which type of abuses can affect kids?
Well, from my experience,
because it's a bit, very sensitive, so they can maybe sometimes pass to some abuses which maybe some adults will not. So,
okay, from my experience, having working with a lot of children from different cultures as well, I've worked as well in Basel with one organization for children with special families, like dysfunctional families, and I can say the worst type of violence you can inflict to a child is abandonment, which is in the scale or in the category of violence. Children can remember, oh, my mom was really rude, or she was like really strict, and she would throw a shoe on my face, when I was doing something wrong. But they will talk about this as an anecdote. But if they are missing this part, if mom is not there, never showing up, she's an alcoholic, or dad is an alcoholic, they really resent this. That's like the one violence that marks you forever. That's the one that really leaves a lot of trauma.
And what about the sexual abuse?
Well, this is another thing, and that's of course the number one, the first one. In some cases, some children, they just don't recall. They kind of delete it from their brains, but the body remembers. So there is a trigger when they are adults and they bring up again the whole memory. But another thing about this, that from 10 cases of abuse against children and teenagers, 9 were committed by a very close person, either
Yes.
stepfather, father, uncle, godfather, cousin, uncle, teacher. So it's really important to pay attention when we see some signals of stress on our children, or really small children that don't want to, for instance, kiss someone. Like, no, I don't want to kiss, and you say like, no, you have to say hello, you have to
Not
give a hug.
force them to kiss and hug, right?
Because it might be going on something that you don't know, and you have to talk with the child privately, not embarrassing him or her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the draws, I think the teachers, they pay attention to the draws these children do
Exactly.
at school. It's really, draws show a lot.
I would like to mention, because you mentioned statistics, I would like to mention that nearly 1 of 3 kids here in Switzerland, they was victim of domestic violence in one form or other. What about the online violence, let's say like that? Because nowadays with the social media, kids are very exposed to any type of online violence and abuse.
Well, I think Liliana can tell us much more about the parental control on phones and these devices, because she's a mom herself. But I can talk later, like what can we maybe do to prevent this beyond.
Well, I've seen that many parents put some kind of spies on the cell phones and computers to like track what these children are watching and if they are communicating to someone. But I think open conversations at home are key for this, because you have to talk and explain and say why. Don't hide, don't try to hide anything, and keep an eye on your child. Wow.
Yeah, well,
Daniela?
Thank you. And this is something important, like talking openly about what you're doing in the computer. Like, what are you doing in your computer? Like, I have now Instagram, or I have a Facebook. And those are the platforms that are actually the main channels to reach out children and teenagers in vulnerability. Like the huge criminal associations that are behind that are looking for children using the same photo they use, or like trying to bring up like the last trend on music, on dance and TikTok. So it's important that we know what they are doing. Like, so if you have an account on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever social media, you have to ask your children, so what do you do? Show it to me. What kind of photos are you uploading? Or, so you have a new friend, and have you ever seen him? Did you see photos of him or her?
Or see it
like
physically.
Yeah,
in
and it's
reality?
like in this place, if you want to meet someone that you've met online, has to come here at home. You can invite her for dinner or for a tea. Like, it's really important to be involved in what they are doing, because technology and social media is something we cannot avoid for these generations. It's something like they grow up with this. I wouldn't recommend giving a cell phone or an iPad to a child until they are 7, but sometimes it's hard because your child is visiting another child, and then they are accessing iPad or iPhone or whatever, like internet. So it's important to talk openly about that.
Yeah. Opferhilfe,
Yeah.
so that we mentioned in the other series.
So Opferhilfe Schweiz.ch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like general, and you can access different languages.
Okay, thank you very much. So do you think when a child is part of and raised in a family which has problems and they fight a lot, they arrive even to the part of physical abuse, they will create a life trauma? on how after, when they are adults, they can delete, let's say like this trauma and this post-traumatical syndrome they can develop?
Well, this is something that has to be treated. Trauma is something that has to have attention, therapy, loads of interventions, because and not only yourself, but like a systemic intervention with people that has been involved. Because trauma can even say, as I said, trauma can be deleted from your brain when you were a child. Even when you are a teenager, you can kind of forget it, and then trauma remains in your body. So whatever triggers
in your subconscious,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So it can be whatever, a light or a song or the very moment where someone was yelling at me, it comes again back with a boss or with another relationship, and it pops up. So it's really important to treat trauma. It's not something, oh yeah, he has been through violence and it's okay. If you as a mom or as a dad have been through a relationship where violence was the main dynamic, it's really important when you are already overcoming that, when you're already done, that you take your children to the psychologist.
And it's not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it's a sign of strength that you are ready to fight against. Yeah. So.
I would like to say thank you to our technical team for their support. Thank you very much to you for listening us to this important subject. I wish you a good day.